Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
We're trying to reach Richard. He's supposed to be on here. Anyway, we've got Larry with us. Hi, Larry. How you doing?
Hello, Stuart. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not
Hello?
sure what's going on. Richard?
I am here. I was on listening to you, but for some reason when I use Skype, you don't know I'm there.
Skype cannot work on Blog Talk.
Well, I'm just using it as a call-in number, but I guess it doesn't pick me up for some reason. I'm getting you on my computer.
What's the call-in number that you use?
That I used?
On Skype. What's the Skype number?
I have to look that up. Hang on.
Anyway, how you doing?
That on the air.
It doesn't matter. I'll just use my phone.
Okay. Yeah.
Since this
Skype
is working.
For whatever reason. Okay.
Well, I only do it so I have a better microphone and sound better. But as long as you're hearing me fine, we'll go this way.
Excellent.
How are you guys?
It's a real good sound, Richard. It sounds really good.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Sounds great. Well,
I'm happy to be here.
Well, how have you been?
I've been good. I've been busy. How are you guys doing?
And we're doing fine, I think. Larry, how are you doing?
Well, storms all the time, but I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, it's kind of rough.
Yeah.
Richard, what have you've been working a little bit on the economy, or I guess one could say the global economy and currency manipulation. Could we? What's your research showing you?
Well, it's kind of interesting. If I went back like a couple years ago, I met this guy who said he wanted to talk to me about what was going on with Iraqi dinars. And I didn't know anything about it at the time, but since I respected this guy, and he was someone that I met through working on way back on Watchers 9 in 2015. And so I met with him at his hotel, and he said that there's going to be a revaluation of Iraqi's currency. And he thought it would be much sooner than it actually has been. But I listened on and basically learned that this kind of thing has sort of happened before. It happened to Kuwait when Saddam Hussein was toppled. Kuwait intentionally devalued their currency in 1991 so that Saddam couldn't profit by it. And he stole, millions of dinars, Kuwaiti dinars, and took them to Iraq. And those were all denominated, I guess you'd say. So what happened a month later, after his government was toppled and Kuwaiti was freed, back during the Gulf War, as you guys remember, in 91, the Kuwait dinars, they're also called dinars in Kuwait, had something happen to them. It wasn't an RV, but it was called a redenomination. And all of a sudden, the money was worth something like $3.40 per dinar. And for what we read, even though I don't know anyone that did this, and I can't tell you from personal experience, but some people made an enormous amount of money because their currency was basically worth many times more than what it once was. Well, there are several countries that are in that same situation again. One is Iraq, Another is Vietnam. There's speculation on Iran's currency, which I believe is called the rial. Vietnam is using something they call the dong, and Iraq also has a dinar. And then there's this very strange idea that the Zimbabwe Zim might finally get reestablished again. Now, if you remember, Zim dollars basically went through a period of hyperinflation back in 2008 to the point where it was billions of Zim dollars to purchase anything, like a loaf of bread. You'd have to walk in with a shopping cart full of paper bills. And the last one that they minted was the largest note in history, and it was a $100 trillion Zim.
Wow.
And they ended up being worth in U.S. dollars at the time. Now this is almost 8 years ago or so. Ended up being worth about 40 cents, 100 trillion Zim. Well, now they're selling anywhere between $50 to $100 for a $100 trillion note, and it's not that they're worth anything. It's just because they're a novelty, and they've started to become collector's items.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, what's been happening with all of the RV is that there's something bigger going on here that I don't quite understand. You wouldn't believe what some of the websites out there are saying, but there's something occurring that they're calling the GCR, or the Global Currency Reset. Now,
Yes.
We've known for some time that the dollar is in precarious ground, 19 trillion in debt, and the dollar is losing value, and Trump is kind of holding it up by various means, and yet the left and most of the media hates Trump to a degree that we've never experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, everyone in the Middle East loves Trump because they're glad to see the backside of Obama, leaving America at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump is currently over there. Now, what they've been saying is that there are several different websites and even Christian organizations that are into this, where you'll listen to a podcast from several of these groups that are doing that, and they open up with prayers for the sick, and then they segue into various IMF notes and what's going on to increase the value of specific world currencies, and they say that they want their listeners to be more aware instead of the basic John Q. public that has no idea that this is going on. Right. I look at it as like either this is going to be a miraculous thing and the entrance into a different age where money is a completely different situation,
right.
or it's a complete fantasy. I have no proof at all to know one way or the other, and I'm certainly not going to tell people to do anything other than if they feel like they want to invest in a few dinar. I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that, because it's a basically low risk investment, because you're just buying currency, and if nothing happens, you can always just return it. You're going to lose some money in the exchange rate process, but it's not like it becomes totally worthless.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that there is.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, we know that there is natural resources in abundance in the countries I've mentioned. In Iraq, they've got oil.
Yes.
From what I understand, the second largest oil field in the world is in Iraq. And they have diamonds and other precious minerals. Zimbabwe is incredibly rich in minerals and all sorts of things, chromium, lithium, diamonds. China is going in right now into Zimbabwe and buying up large pieces of land. And if it hadn't been for Mugabe, who has been a completely awful dictator, that country would have become the breadbasket of Africa like it once was. But instead, they're living in abject poverty there. But because they have such huge natural resources, and because they're rich in something called lithium, China needs that, because China is the number one producer of lithium batteries in the world.
Yes.
So all of these countries are on the edge of something. And Vietnam and Iraq are two countries that have been war torn, and because of that, their currency has been completely devalued. The dong in Vietnam is worth about 22,700 to the dollar. I mean, it's not even worth a penny a dong. And the Iraqi dinar fluctuates. It fluctuates from about 1,166 to 1,183 dinars to the dollar. Now, that's been going on for the past couple of years. However, what's going on currently militarily is that Trump is helping them to free Mosul, which is the last city in Iraq that's war-torn, that has been taken over by ISIS. They're down to, last thing I read, it said 14 square kilometers is the only part that's left. But I just found out today Trump is sending more troops in to help go door to door and get these guys out of there. And they're just, basically anybody who's driving a vehicle is shot on sight. And they're telling the citizens to stay in their homes, because anyone in a car is going to be shot. Because how would you know if you're a citizen or an ISIS soldier? Because they all look the same. So they have their jobs cut out for them. But once Mosul is free, what all of these sites say is that they expect that to happen before Ramadan. And in Iraq, Ramadan is a national, it's a religious holiday. It lasts for 30 days. And it's not like everybody just takes off time, but they feed the poor and they do things for people, nice things. They slow down, they don't work as hard, and it's basically a 30-day period. And they're hoping that the Iraqi dinars will RV by the beginning of Ramadan, which is the 25th of this month. So it's very possible that if it is going to happen, if this is more than just speculation, that it could happen pretty soon. And then we'll know for sure.
Yeah, I have heard some.
And you were saying something and I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. One of our customers bought a whole bunch of dinar, and they've been sitting on them for a long, long time, and hoping, of course, that, it would reset itself. Now, Lagrange did mention in one of her speeches a reset, and she also mentioned the number 7, the magic number 7, which probably translates over to this year. 5777 would be the time of a reset. Now, I don't know what a global reset. When you use the term RV, are you just talking about a revaluation?
Yes, exactly. Which is something that didn't happen in Kuwait. They call their situation a redenomination, but in this case, they're calling it reevaluation. And here's why I think it may be more than just a pipe dream. And what you just said, I think, is also important, because this is also, we don't know for certain, and I have to preface everything because I don't want to sound like some kind of, crazy lunatic that's going on here and telling people to make, investments in things that are worthless. But it's a low impact investment. I don't think it's a crazy thing to do. I think it's just, if it does happen and you didn't do it, you'd really feel stupid since you don't have to spend that much money. You can, for example, if you got what?
I was going to ask you, how do you buy a dinar? I mean, where do you go to buy it?
Well, there are places online you can buy it. There's people on eBay that sell it. There's one company that I've used in the past called TreasuryVault.com that seems to be a respectable company. They've done a good job. There's been other companies that have been literally closed and put out of business by the FBI. One of those early companies a couple of years ago was called Dinar Corp. I don't think they even exist anymore. They were basically shut down. But TreasuryVault.com seems to be one way to do it, or you can go to a local currency exchange place. I mean, there's some in every city, and basically call them and order what you want, and they'll have it for you in a couple of days, and you can just go in and pay for it and pick it up, walk home with it. There's a couple of those places in Beverly Hills, and most airports will do it for you. If you're traveling overseas, a major international airport will have currency exchange places. You might pay more for the currency if you do that, but it's pretty easy to go in there and swap your currency. Now, this is like when we go to Peru or we go to Israel. There's usually one of those right in the airport where you can exchange American dollars for shekels or for nuevos solaces if you're in Peru. So it's pretty common to do that. The problem I always end up with is I end up with a bunch of international coins that when I get home look just like quarters, and I'm fishing them out and they won't work in anything. But that happens. But what you were saying about the number 7, you're correct. This is 5777. And last time when Rabbi Glazerson happened to be here in February, I was asking him, I said, so when is the Shemitah year? I mean, we've been hearing about that. The books have come out about it and everything else, that we could actually be in the year of Jubilee. Now, if that's true, then there's some kind of scriptural basis for this actually occurring. He thought that the Shemitah year was going to be 2018, but that there would be a Shemitah year. That's what his facts and figures said.
Is a Shemitah year the same as a Jubilee, or does it come 1 year after the Jubilee?
Well, from what I understand, from asking Glazerson, he thought it was going to be in 2018, but that would be 5778, which would be in September.
Right.
And so, truly, I don't know. I mean, because we also know that the Hebrew calendar could be off by either a year or a few months. It's not, we don't know if the actual start time on the Hebrew calendar was accurate or not. And there is even a theory, and
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Glazerson said there's a theory that some rabbis had that another year needs to be added to the calendar because there was a year that was inserted after Adam was created that hasn't been taken account of. If that's the case, then we're still in 5776.
Huh.
So it's very confusing.
Well,
and this is something I've talked with Tom Horn about, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know the Book of Enoch says that we are confused on our dates, which is interesting.
Yeah, that I don't remember reading that before, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, what's interesting is the star sign that's coming up on September 23rd. I've been kind of watching this, and you may remember the comets that crossed over Algol, Satan's head, and formed that cross. That was all on April 11th. So I was wondering, well, why is this so important to the Lord that he would mark it in such a way as to recall Genesis and the crushing of Satan's head? So it's kind of interesting that when you put it all together and then you come to this star sign, it really does look very, very suspicious that we're entering in. There was a rabbi back in the 1200s who claimed that the Messianic era would begin in 2017 or 5777. So
right. Well, Glazerson believed that to be the case as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other hand, we had so many codes and gematria and everything come out last year, and I'm not about to make predictions of such a thing because no one can do that, but we were taken aback by how many strange occurrences of the number 5776 appeared in Scripture. It was really weird. And I was doing a television show at Skywatch TV and talked with Tom Horn for an hour about this because he'd just written a book, Zenith 2016, which came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
And he had found like all these ancient texts and prophets and rabbis throughout the centuries that said 5776 was going to be the year of Messiah. And Glazerson found this Kabbalist that had done all of this work. That's a big thing for the rabbis that are into the Kabbalah. They use numbers a lot, and they do a lot of figuring. And basically, this isn't a cult or anything like that. I don't want to still anyone's fears about that kind of thing. It isn't that. It's just that all the Hebrew characters are numbered, and so they will look at a name and they'll add up all the characters in it, and they can do it in various ways, and they can get numbers. Well, they were adding up sentences about the coming of Messiah, and they all added up to 5776. And I did a YouTube video about that last year because I thought it was so interesting. I didn't know why this was happening, and it was just everywhere. And then nothing happened. So now, 5777, the 3 sevens, also is interesting because it actually refers back to the state of Israel, because in 1917 there was the Balfour Declaration, and then 50 years later was the 67 War, and now here we are again 50 years after the war, and we're at 5777. And now we've got all of these countries coming against Israel. It's just like it's unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it, and all kinds of anti-Semitic activity, and people are acting just crazy. I mean, there's also a lot of animosity towards Christians that I've never seen in my lifetime, ever, this much animosity. It looks like, what happened? Why do all of a sudden people hate Christians so much? And there's animosity between Jews and Christians. Yeah, I have no other explanation for it than what you just said.
Yeah, it's a spiritual thing, just like the Lord said was going to happen. And
yeah,
I believe that in modern times, you have to mark, we have the 120-year cycle. And when I did the Omega Code, I started at the first Jewish Congress, laying the foundation for the nation of Israel. And that was in 1897. 120 years later is 5777, where we are right now. All of the cycles within that 120 years are phenomenal, and I just don't see how anybody can get around it mathematically. It's almost like the odds are quadrillions to one, particularly when you put it into context with the 6,000 years that the early church taught, that this current age would last 6,000 years. Well, here we are. And it's just kind of interesting that all of a sudden now we have all of this stuff rising up and staring us at the face, I guess. What do you think?
Well, I agree. It's really interesting, is all I can say. I mean, getting back to the economy thing, and I'm not an economist. I've just been trying to study that this dinar thing is valid. But what's happening is Iraq has installed ATM machines at the banks. Now, they haven't been able to do that because the currency just couldn't be dispensed properly because it's massive bills. I mean, you've got, 5,000 dinar bills, 10,000 dinar bills, and the biggest one, there's a 25,000 dinar bill, and there might even be a 50,000 dinar bill, but I don't think they do much with the 50,000 bill. But you can't really go to ATM and dispense something like that. And a 25,000 dinar bill it might be worth about $21 US, something like that. But if suddenly it's worth one to one, you could walk into a bank with a 25,000 dinar bill, and all of a sudden you've got a ton of money.
Yes. It's in the leverage of it, I would assume, from that. But it's kind of interesting that Legrand, when she gave that speech for the IMF, talked about a reset. Donald Trump has talked about a reset, and he said he didn't want it to hurt the American people. He was going to try and work something out so that either didn't occur, or if it did occur, we could at least come through it. I think he knows perfectly well because he's mentioned it and even did, Larry. You remember in the pre-election, he mentioned several times about a currency reset. He didn't call it a reset, but that's exactly what it meant.
Yeah, Trump warned us that there was going to be something like that. I'm sorry, Larry. I didn't mean to step on what you were saying.
That's okay. I was going to say I certainly remember that, and it's interesting that you're looking into and studying some of this reevaluation, because it appears we may be headed into that. I mean, there's some strange goings on in the global markets, and especially recently also there's been some back burner talk about if they begin to bring Trump down, we may have a currency crisis. And, of course, he left the U.S. today on his trip to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, and immediately after he left, and I've watched Lou Dobbs today on Fox, and he had General Jack Keane and a number of others on that are ascribing that there is an absolute total coup in progress to take him out of office while he's out of the country even. I guess you could say we're in a crisis mode. What do you think, or what do you hear, Richard?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's unprecedented level of media negative attention towards Trump. Harvard University came out with a new study just this morning that listed all of the networks, and most of them, over 80% of the time, any mention of Trump was negative. Only Fox had 48% negative, and it was like, it's ridiculous. And most Americans are wise to the fact that this is going on, that our news media has become propaganda machines. It's just, even Professor Rips, my good friend in Israel, who's the Torah code expert, who figured out the whole thing to begin with, felt like our news media was turning into Pravda. Like
yes.
a propaganda machine. He was concerned for my safety in one of the letters he wrote to me, because he felt like we were entering a time almost of civil war in America. Most people, when you read comments in these news articles, the ones that allow you to comment on them, people will write in comments that are just scathing. And they do that because they hate the news media. They think it's just complete baloney. And I think people are getting incensed by it. I don't think it would take much to flip this into something where people finally have had enough and there is a civil war over it. But then the other day I was looking up, well, why are Hollywood actors and actresses so anti-Trump? I just couldn't understand it, why this was. And so I read what one of them said, and he said that the reason they don't like Trump is because they have to work with people like him in the industry all the time, and guys that are big and bombastic and say things like Trump does are always the ones that screw them. Now, I've had the same experience out here. I know exactly what they're talking about. Exactly. I've been in these big studio meetings where they're guys just like what they described, and I can understand why they would say that. Except I don't, for some reason I don't get my gut instinct about Trump is that whatever he's doing right now, he's doing for a number of reasons, for the good of the country and also for self-preservation. I think he's under so much attack and probably knows a lot that we don't know that is going on, where some of his decisions may not seem, like, it's like, what? Why is he doing that? But we don't know all the reasoning behind it. This whole thing with Comey has gotten just ridiculous. I mean, they're bringing the Russians in like constantly, and it's absurd because there's no proof or evidence of any wrongdoing.
Well, let me ask you guys this. Let me ask you guys this question and get your opinion on this one. I watched a Navy SEAL on Fox today, and he said something really, really interesting, and I thought it was apropos. I mean, it sounded absolutely reasonable, because he was saying that he was asking Fox, he said, you guys need to evaluate what you're saying against Trump. He said, because I want the whole country to hear this. He said, we are all riding in the USS Donald Trump, and if this ship goes down, so do all of us. And I thought that is really an interesting statement. It reminds me of the Titanic. It reminds me of, except the only thing with the Titanic, the passengers didn't knock holes in the floor and let the water in. Supposedly an iceberg did it. But what do you guys think? The USS Donald Trump, and we're all in this boat.
I tend to agree to some extent with that, because what's our alternative if it's not Trump? It certainly is no one on the left. I mean, when I hear what Chuck Schumer says, I some of these people I just have an enormous aversion to, because everything they say is negative and makes totally no sense. And Nancy Pelosi, I mean, she is demonstrating like early signs of dementia, and it's like, I don't know why anyone takes anything these people say seriously, other than they're just in a high position and think they're godlike and that the rest of us are stupid or something. It's really a phenomena that I've never seen before, because it goes against all logic and all reasoning and common sense, and even just common decency. There's just common decency and respect for our president and the people who are in charge of the country is just completely absent. It's like anything goes. It's like Stephen Colbert, and what he was saying about Trump is just like It's totally tasteless, clueless, and it's like I can't even believe they're saying that on national television. It's just like, man, you guys have no class. You're just totally classless when it comes to anything like this.
Well, I think,
and we all voted for Trump, or at least those that did vote for him, because he was already a billionaire and couldn't be bought, wasn't part of the system, and could go in there and possibly clean house. But I think it may even be too big of a job for him. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it.
Well, he definitely can't do it by himself. But I don't know if he can roust up the people that put him into office or not. It's almost like they've gone back to sleep now. Things are going to be okay. But personally, I think this is a communist coup takeover. This kind of follows the Communist Manifesto and the 45 communist points, and we only got about 3 of them left to go. And this sounds like this is what this is about. They're desperate. They have to. We know from the scriptures that the New World Order is coming in.
Yes, this is another reason why I'm interested in this global currency reset theory, because to me it could have something to do with the Book of Revelation, and I've been following it because of that, trying to understand the intricacies of what's going on here, and that if this happens, we know that they're pushing for paperless currency.
Yes.
And that would be a global thing. And once that happens, that is part of the whole global currency reset mantra of everything I read is paperless currency, and the banks would control all of the money worldwide. And it's just a very short step from that to receiving some way to get your currency, whether it's a tattoo or some kind of implantable chip, or now we thought for a while it was going to be a microchip that put in your hand or in your forehead, but now it could even be a microscopic electronic tattoo kind of thing that you wouldn't see it, or you wouldn't look like you are walking around with barcode on your forehead, but essentially that's how it would work. And it would basically let anybody know what your past purchases were, where you live, how much money you have in the bank. I mean, everything personal about you would be known. At that point, we're like cattle. We're a commodity. And
yes.
At that point, we're slaves to the system, and no one is truly free anymore in the world. And this is what happened during the time of Noah. And this is what Yeshua says in Matthew 24, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be. So that kind of gets me a little excited that we're rapidly approaching that. And I know there's people that even think, and this gets into some weird stuff, and I can say these things to you guys because you know where I'm coming from on this. I'm just floating these theories that there are even factions in Black Ops that could actually be cloning the giants. They think they've got actual DNA from the Nephilim, and they're trying to recreate this. Now, this is what Steve Quayle and guys like that think. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's going on, only because I know this military guy that we interviewed for Watchers 10 that actually saw one of the giants, shot and was one of the guys that helped shot and kill him. This was a big, giant, 12, 15 feet. I kid you not. He breaks out in tears when he talks about it. I know he's not lying to me. This actually happened in Afghanistan. And this thing was carted off to an Air Force base. And that was the last anyone saw of this thing. Now, this was actual tissue from a live giant. Now, he wasn't live at that point, but I mean, it's not degraded DNA. This is not paleo DNA like we've suffered with trying to get DNA from ancient skulls like we showed that we did in Watchers 10, and we've done some even since then, but all of our tests for DNA that I've done with L.A. Marzulli have proven that the elongated skull people's origins were the Middle East. And that's exactly what Genesis chapter 6 says. And also in the book of Numbers, I believe it is. So, I mean, okay, so we basically have proven that the Bible is not just a book of religion, which it's not. It's a historical book that's based on things that what we might call today miracles. Those things actually occurred, and it's just telling us about them. So if that happens again, if they reconstitute these giants in sort of a Jurassic Park way, and this doesn't seem impossible to me with the size of our Black Ops compartmentalized science programs, they're doing things that we have no idea what's going on in those. I really think they're 50 to 60 years ahead of any technology we know about.
Yes.
And if they're doing that, then there could be an outbreak of giants. Now, why they would do this, I don't know. Meanwhile, we've got CERN doing incredibly weird things. And I got this DVD from, have you guys heard of Doug Woodward?
Yes.
I think so, yes.
Yes. Doug is an author, but he's a really smart guy and worked with a guy named Anthony Patch, who is an expert on CERN. And they put out a video, which it's really a very simple DVD. It's not really like a big production. It's more or less like a radio show on wheels. It basically has a few still images, but it's just to get the information. It's what they've done this for. It's called CERN Decoded. CERN, CERN.
I just got a copy of that. Somebody sent me yesterday.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had to screen Watcher 7 at the Sonoma Film Festival at the 1st of April. And I have a DVD player in my car. Now, I'm not watching that while I'm driving, but I can listen to the sound off of any disc. And since there wasn't all that many graphics on this anyway, I popped it in, and I've listened to this thing twice. And what they're doing in CERN is truly just the most bizarre scientific experiments. They're really happening. I mean, they've got a statue to the god Shiva, and they're dancing around it, worshiping it. And they have a computer there that is a quantum level computer that can handle millions of operations per second. Well, actually, trillions a second, faster than any computer that we have. And there's only one company that's making this computer, and they happen to have it there because when they do this is the largest device in the world. It's called the Super Hadron Collider, and basically it's like a 17-mile in diameter ring that goes through parts of France and Switzerland. It's so big, and when they collide particles in it, it creates a stream of data that's so vast that if they didn't have this quantum computer, they wouldn't be able to record the results. But they said they've been able to look into other dimensions and pull data from an adjacent universe with this computer. Now, that part was really intriguing to me. So it's like, well, what are they trying to do? And many of us think they're trying to open some sort of a portal into an alternate reality. And a lot of people think that might be a scientific, that you might be able to actually do that. If you had enough power, this thing has so much power, it can actually affect the Earth's magnetosphere. It's actually many times more powerful, from what these guys were saying, than the Earth's magnetosphere is from a natural standpoint. So it creates this big bump of magnetism when it's in operation. Now, we have no idea what that's doing to us or if it's affecting our current reality. And a lot of people think that this phenomena that everybody calls the Mandela effect is tantamount to what's going on in CERN, that it's actually changing our reality subtly in various ways, and we don't realize it, but, that's a theory, and I realize how crazy that sounds. It's only a theory. It's completely, as all these things are, unprovable because it verges on the spiritual realm. So all of that's going on at the same time that we have the global currency reset, which could be happening within the next couple of weeks. I mean,
well, we do know that they
really is
definitely
interesting.
are going to do it. Yeah, they're going to do it. Legrand was positive. We're going to have a global reset. Trump made the comment we have to have fair dealings. Well, the only way you can have a fair dealing is a global currency, so that everybody's operating at the same level.
Well, there's guys that have come out, and I believe some of these guys are I don't want to use the word spiritual in a bad way, because there's also kind of a New Age-ish standpoint to some of this stuff. There is this feeling that, which is almost, there is some Judaic theories that there are really two earths. There's a spiritual earth and a physical earth, and that the physical earth hides the spiritual earth. There's strange scriptures that say the sky will roll back as a scroll and all of these things. Well, how can that happen unless there's something physically going on? And Blazeson believes that's the case. Well, some people think that we're entering into a golden age, which I guess we would call like the 1,000-year reign. But that means that for Christians that believe that, it means that that's the time where Jesus Christ is reigning on the earth and there's peace and harmony everywhere. And I've talked with Howard Storm, who had one of the most famous near-death experiences ever. And he was shown that period. And if I ask him about it, he breaks down in tears. He says, all I can say to you is that you don't want to miss it. He could hardly speak in talking about it.
Yeah, I saw the interview you guys had with him, and it was unbelievable. I shared some emails after that. I watched that with him and checked his website out, and he had a phenomenal experience, absolutely phenomenal. And, I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, there's people having near-death experiences by the millions now, and they're very lucid and very descriptive, detailed experiences. And a lot of people are saying that, well, there's this boy, Nathan, a little Hebrew kid that's 15 that died for 8 minutes and was being interviewed by a room full of rabbis and saying that they were asking him, well, is the Messiah, is it 10 years away, 1 year? He goes, no, sooner, 1 year away. And he said, it's imminent, is what they showed him when he was in his near-death experience. Imminent was the term he used. Now, this is what everyone says, though, and then nothing happens. But we know that there's supposed to be some kind of an anti-Christ character revealed, and this is what originally caused me to be curious with L.A. Marzulli's work, because I got to thinking, could this be what we might call an alien today? You know, that it's some kind of fallen angel. It's not really, this entity is not really human, but he's accepted as being all-powerful and can do all sorts of really crazy things. And guys like Bill Salas, who really study up on this stuff, who's really quite brilliant, he's written a lot of books, thinks that we're entering a period of time where there's going to be, where the supernatural is our way of life, where we'll be seeing things that we've never seen before on a normal basis, that these things will just be happening and unavoidable. And, you know, so far we're not seeing anything that's supernatural, that, you know, we're not seeing like aliens walking down the street with us or anything like that. But it wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're looking at, too, is a strong delusion is coming in. And the Lord said, you know, I'm going to send this delusion down upon the earth. And I think the arrival is part of it. And I've always thought that the evolution concept is part of it, because we're supposed to be going upwards and joining the gods of the heavens, which would merge in with the arrival. So this is going to get extremely fascinating. I want to comment.
Totally.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just said totally. It's. I think that people have to really. I think people are less apt to not believe that there's other life in the universe today than they did even 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. It seems almost ridiculous to think that there isn't. It's just whether the life that we're considering is interdimensional or interplanetary life, and how would we know the difference? We have no experience in that area yet. We wouldn't be able to discern what it is that's happening. But some people think that we already have beings controlling the world right now. It just seems like every country is fighting with all sorts of crazy, rebellious stuff and things that don't even make sense, and people that act like complete idiots. I mean, the ones in charge of the Democratic Party is just like, I've never seen anything like it. It defies logic and common sense. I've never seen any. I mean, I can't even believe what they're saying. If they're trying to get voters, I don't know why anyone would vote for them. I really don't know. It's like our whole political system is broken. Even the Republican side is pretty near as bad in many ways.
Well, the book of Isaiah talks about that and how our government kind of implodes upon itself, and I think that's what we're watching. Nothing can be done that should be done. It's ruler against ruler, and Jeremiah, they're just fighting it out, and of course it leads to the uttermost destruction of the United States, and I think that's going to begin here real soon. That we are going to see earth changes and spiritual changes, like you were saying. We're not going to believe it when it happens, when the supernatural merges with us here in this dimension. Red Elk,
right.
An elder Native American, used to say that, you know, the veil is thinning, and when it gets real thin,
yes.
We're going to be walking together pretty much with this probably very evil system that they're setting up.
Yeah, and I would really rather not be here during that period, and maybe that's what the return of Yeshua is all about. It's like a rescue, and I've always wondered that. Except that some people think that there's not going to be a big, huge period of destruction, that we're going to enter into this golden age period. After the RV happens, everyone's going to have so much money, there won't be battles over anything, and the elites will lose their power. Now, this is what a lot of people in those circles are saying now. They feel like this is the overthrow of the elite. And they refer to all of the crazy things happening with the Clintons and the chemtrails and, you know, the North Korea, all of these things that are happening. And I've actually wondered if North Korea was a distraction from the global currency reset, that it's caused everyone's attention to be shifted. And that this whole thing with Trump and the media and all that they're pouring on the coal because they're trying to keep everyone away from looking into the currency situation and what's actually taking place. This is the last gasp of all of that stuff before it actually occurs. And imagine what you could do if you bought, say that you bought several million dinars or several million dong, and all of a sudden it became worth 3 times to the dollar. Problems would be over. You could start shelters for the homeless. You could pay off all your bills and buy a house and own it outright. You wouldn't have any more trouble for the rest of your life paying for anything. And a tremendous amount of good things could be done. And then people have fantasized over the idea, well, what if the Zim dollar is also revalued and it's put into operation? Then all of a sudden, even if they swiped 6 zeros off the trillion figure, they were saying, most recently yesterday, I read a post where they're saying that those Zim $100 trillion notes would be worth $150,000 each. Now, that is like complete speculation, but it would be really fascinating if that actually happened, because it could be all part of this crazy, warped and twisted global plan, which seems like a really interesting thing at first and then goes bad. I don't know, guys. I'm just saying. Well, I'm just telling you what's going on.
Yeah, we don't have much more time, Richard, but I wanted to ask your opinion on something, because I've been watching, and of course, Trump's trip to the Middle East right now, it appears to be a pivot back to Israel and the Middle East, and I was wondering your opinion on what's the direction there.
I talked to a guy about that today. I said, if Trump goes back, if he reneges on what he says about Israel, then I don't know how I could ever trust him again. Because one of the things that he was saying that they would do is move the embassy to Jerusalem, and they would, they would bring peace to Israel and all that. But what's been occurring recently is there's discussions over the Western Wall being given over to the Palestinians, and that Jerusalem would be considered the capital of Palestine, and that Israel would have to resort back to the 1967 borders, which are indefensible. Israel would go back to a really tiny little strip of land that, hardly any land left. And this is from Palestinians that don't know how to develop the land and are basically doing nothing with the land they've got. They just want to take it from the Jews. Yeah. It's really the truth. Because I've been there, I've seen what they're doing, and they're doing nothing with the land. Israel, the people of Israel are doing amazing things with the tiny bit of land they're given. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm really worried about Israel.
Yeah, we got about 50 seconds left. How do they get a hold of you, Richard?
Oh, they can. Thank you. You can go to pinlight.com. I'm starting something called the Pinlight Consortium. It's for people that want to invest in really interesting projects, and unless, of course, the currency is RV'd and we don't need to do that. But I have about 3 or 4 different projects that I'm trying to launch. One of them I have a good chance of launching. I have to be patient with these things because they're all expensive to do.
Okay.
There's also the rectification of Yeshua thing. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on. I guess we're done. And
thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Larry, also. Night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks for having me.